Welcome to yet another episode of 5 and 15. Today, here with me in the studio is
Suchi Chowdhury, RMIT student researching Indian stand-up comedy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much, Suchi, for being here and for co-hosting today with me. And who is the main star of our episode today?
We have today with us Associate Professor Kerry Mullan. We are absolutely thrilled to have her here. Kerry, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself.
Thank you, Suchi, and thank you, Ben, for the invitation. So, as Suchi said, my name is Kerry Mullan. I am convener of languages here at RMIT University, and I'm also chair of the board of the AHSN.
Brilliant. And Kerry, you know the drill. We've got 5 questions. We have 15 minutes.
Please, can you tell us about the latest project or publication that you are or were working on and how it relates to humour studies?
Yeah, well, I've spent the last few years looking at humour in my local neighbourhood Facebook group, and I've been looking particularly at the way humour is used to create belonging. And the most recent project was what I'm calling the community veneration of a local plumber. So a bit like hero worship, if you like, but beyond that, because there were religious connotations as well. So the plumber was really built up to be this absolute phenomenon in the group over the last 3 years or so. The veneration wasn't created exclusively in a humorous way, so there was some really serious veneration going on, serious recommendations, but mostly it was humorous. And the humour was multimodal. So this is something that is particular to social media. And by multimodal, I mean linguistic and digital. So some of the linguistic humour was created through exaggeration or wordplay. There was a limerick created in his honour and poems, etc. And then you have the digital side of the humour as well. So the use of GIFs and memes, and emojis. And I think what's really interesting about this project is that this veneration could not actually have happened like this if it were offline.
Right. And just for the audience who might be interested in this
veneration.
It's veneration of that plumber. So what was that plumber's name?
So the plumber was called Ronald Stoke. Oh, that's a pseudonym, obviously.
Right, so if people want to look it up, Ronald Stoke the plumber, veneration galore.
That's it.
Right,
yes.
Cool, there we go. So this is what Kerry is working on right now. I heard the keynote that you delivered on the plumber. It was brilliant at the last HSN conference. So let's see what else we've got in store for you, which is the second question. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about how and why you got into human social media in general? I mean, Paul the plumber might have been your first port of call for, research. So why humour and how this kind of research, how did it come about?
Yeah. So what I'm interested in with humour and social media was really particular to this group, but I think you can also apply this to a lot of social media in general. What really struck me was the use of humour to create this sense of community and a sense of belonging in what is actually a group of strangers. So the people in this group mostly do not know each other. Right. They don't know the plumber. And yet
they don't know him yet.
Yeah, they don't know him yet. Some of them do now know him, of course. But what was really particular was the posts that were made exclusively to entertain people in the group, to make people laugh. And then what happened was you had these recurring themes, which then became insider jokes. And this, as I say, it's not exclusive to this group, but it was something that was very obvious in this group. And then you have the co-creation of humour. So you've got people then responding to the humour and adding to it. The users, absolutely, in the group. One of the threads that I looked at in the past was it had about 120 comments or contributions in answer to someone giving away for free a pile of dead leaves. So what you see on social media then is that it creates a space for humour to emerge in a way that it really couldn't in face-to-face interactions.
I mean, this is just so interesting because, as you had been saying before, social media and online humour is such a big area. And how many media posts were there? 100 and...
Just for this, for that one thread, there were about 120 contributions. And that's comments, so that doesn't include the reactions. So there were many more people who were reading it and just, pressing likes and so on to show their appreciation.
Kerry, you teach French language and culture at RMIT in Melbourne, Australia. How did you get involved with humour studies? And what made you move into the field, please?
This is a great question. So as a language teacher and a linguist, my speciality or my field of interest is pragmatics. So this is how language is used in context and in interaction. And my other language is French. So until I started looking at humour, I had done a lot of comparative research on French and Australian interactional styles. So the way that French speakers and Australian English speakers have different conversational rules, so different turn-taking rules, different ways that is acceptable to disagree, different ways of expressing opinions. And I had, as part of that research, I recorded a corpus of dinner party conversations in Melbourne. And this was for a project with a colleague in France, and this corpus was created to match a comparable French corpus. And we started looking at all the interactions, and what just became apparent was this really, particularly in the Australian corpus, this extensive use of humour. And so that's where we started looking at humour in the two corpora. And together we actually then created a model for the cross-cultural analysis of humour in interaction, which didn't exist until then. Right. That was how it all started.
Right. Can I just quickly follow up that one? So dinner conversations, so you were sitting there having dinner, recording the dinner conversations?
Yes. So there were guests at my house. So
you kept it close to home then?
Yeah, we kept it close to home.
Controlled environment. Kerry,
that's it.
Now record.
Control. We did have ethics, obviously.
Right, of course.
But yes, it was people that came to our house for dinner. So usually just 4 people. So there'd be myself, my husband, and 2 people as guests. And that really matched what had already been done in the French corpus.
Did you guys get invited to go to other dinners also?
Get recorded?
We did, but hopefully they weren't recorded, or if they were, I don't know about that. Yeah.
Right, fun times. Okay, go to Kerry's, get recorded. You've got the evidence. Kerry got the receipt.
That's it, exactly.
Right.
Kerry, we'll move on to the next question.
Yep.
As the chair of the board of the Australasian Humour Studies Network, how do you see the future of humour studies evolving worldwide?
Yeah, that's a huge question as well. I mean, I think there are as many different answers as there are areas of humour studies, and it's just something that will evolve in multiple directions at once. I think maybe some immediate areas that we see evolving are stand-up and what audiences respond to now, and the shifting limits of humour, I think, and what's appropriate. We had a talk at the conference this year by comedian Joe Avati, and he's a stand-up comedian, and he raised some of these issues, what audiences and different types of audiences respond to, and how comedy needs to evolve in that way. And then I think something else, it's not really my area, but the use of AI in creating humour. I think that's also going to, be a big area for evolution. It will provide a really rich area for research. And I think social media and humour are not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think as well, the last thing I would say is that humour studies is definitely being taken more and more seriously as an academic discipline now, and I would expect that to continue to evolve, as it should, of course.
Just from experience, when I was listening to a talk you gave, I think you, Jessica, and a couple of other people in the HSN working on COVID and COVID memes and stuff, there's just so much there. So the question about the future is just, it's so wide. It's just insanely big.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID and humour is a huge area. That is another project that we are looking at, the way that humour was used during COVID, for example, and the extensive use of social media to share humour that was used as a coping strategy with what was happening with lockdowns, that kind of thing. Yeah, right. Definitely.
I mean, this kind of gets us more or less naturally into the last and final question now, which is, Kerry, just going back to this idea of, you being kind of one of the guiding forces in the HSAN, what do you tell early career people postgrad students. Suchi, this is for you. Please pay attention.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what do you tell early careers, people coming up in the field with humor or related, study areas? Because it's not always clear cut, just humor. It's always something else, like humor plus something else. What do you tell people about this?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is obviously get involved with the AHSN. It was where I started. I had started looking at humour in my own research, and I came across the AHSN conference, and I've really never looked back. I had no idea that humour was looked at from so many different disciplines, and that's one of the things the conference is very good at, is just showing that range of fields that look at humour in different ways. I'd like to think we're a very friendly and welcoming network, and Suchi's nodding, you can't see that. But it's also a network that really values involvement by early career researchers and postgrad students.
And maybe you can just, in that context, now that we are kind of shamelessly plugging things, of course. So what is the conference about? Maybe can you just quickly describe, so when does it happen? What does it usually look like? Who is it for? How do you apply it? Just stuff like that.
So all the information is on our website as well, while we're shamelessly promoting. The conference takes place in February each year, and it moves around different cities and different host institutions, usually universities. There's usually
we should say Australia and
New Zealand, yes. Yeah, particularly Australia and New Zealand. There is always an overarching theme for that year's conference, but all papers on any aspects of humour are always welcome. And we go for 2.5 to 3 days, and there is an early career network, which is part of the AHSN, which you yourself set up, Ben.
And which is now also it has moved to WhatsApp and Facebook, so it's kind of a different platform. So for people interested, there is a coordinator, there is resources, so please just get in touch if you'd like, and we can set this up.
I think also another thing that you're in charge of, Ben, which has been great, are the webinars, the annual webinars as well. And also there are lots of, while we're shamelessly promoting the AHSN.
it is our podcast, so if we were ashamed of promoting it on the podcast, that'd be a bit of a problem.
Exactly. But let's not forget, I guess, some of the other international associations. So you've got the International Society for Humour Studies, the Centre for Comedy Studies Research in London, and lots of other networks that look at particular areas of humour studies as well. And there are... And the forum, so language and the law.
Portugal is running that out of the Netherlands. So it's international. I think that's the best way of describing it. It's really broadly, globally international.
It is, yep. And just to go back to our website, there are links to those associations and journals and lots of other resources on the website, the book reviews. Right. And there's a way of contacting us through the website as well. So I would just encourage people to do that.
And maybe one last plug, the newsletter, Kerry.
Yes, so we also have a newsletter.
Kerry has to do everything.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about the newsletter. Well, the newsletter is really put together by our convener, Jessica Milner-Davis, and the digest editor at the moment, Lucian Leon, who's doing a great job. And we probably do one, not quite every month. They're ad hoc. We don't do them automatically, but they will contain news about the conference as it evolves, book reviews, members' publications, calls for papers for other conferences and other seminars, and anything that is related to the world of humour studies.
Thank you, Kerry. About the AHSN, I'd just like to say one thing as an early career researcher. I've been to 2 of their conferences, and I have just met very friendly people, academics as well as students, who are just interested in seeing good work being done in humour studies. So please get involved.
All right. And with that, it's almost time. Kerry, last few seconds go to you.
Well, just following on from what Suchi said, my first conference was 2015. So next year it will be 10 years. And I've been chair of the board for maybe the last 4. So be careful what you wish for. From your first conference, you go to being chair of the board very quickly.
Gets you hooked. All right. Exactly. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Suchi.